Hello everyone, AmyR here with Prairie Paper and Ink. Another Slimline card. Honestly, I wasn't going to for this card. I wanted to use this Peony Bouquet background stamp from Simon Says Stamp. And I was going to do a standard A2 card, and then immediately started thinking, I wonder, can I make this work on a Slimline card? So that's what I did. So this is for this week's Color Throwdown Challenge, hence the not normal for me colors. That's why I love doing these color challenges, because it gets me out of my box of like pink, purple, rainbow. So the challenge this week was basically terracotta, you know, the terracotta sort of orange color, and black and white. And then we can bring in other neutrals if we want. So for that, I brought in, this is Neenah Desert Storm cardstock here. And I have it in my Misty, and I pulled the foam out of my Misty since I'm using a red rubber cling background stamp. And then I'm inking up the stamp with Ranger Distress Oxide Rusty Hinge ink. This is another ink color that I don't reach for very often, and yet every time I do, I'm reminded of what a nice color it is. It's just, again, I'm so drawn to, you know, the bright pinks and the rainbows and all that stuff. But this is just a gorgeous color. I need to use it more often. So I stamped the image onto the Desert Storm cardstock with that ink. I also used my, and I've shown this many times, I use my mini ink blending tool because it's already super saturated with ink, and that kind of helps to smooth out the ink a bit. And then I cleaned off the stamp completely because I needed to reposition it to stamp on the inside of my card. So my card base is heavyweight white cardstock. It was cut to 7 inches by 8.5, scored at 3.5. So this will be a 3.5 inch by 8.5 inch slimline card. I folded the card inside out, and then I'm doing the exact same thing. I'm just inking up the stamp with that Rusty Hinge Distress Oxide ink, and then using my blending tool to just kind of smooth it out a bit. I'm gonna have to stamp this a second time because I didn't press it down very well, but that's the beauty of having a stamp platform. I can redo this. So I just inked up the areas mostly with just the blending tool, and then it was good. So I did all that. And then I'm going to do an envelope as well. So I have this black slimline envelope, which I don't have a link for yet. That's all I'm going to say. But the funny thing is after I did all of this, like it was all finished and I was like doing all my links, I remembered that there are the brown paper bag slimline envelopes, like the color, that's what it's called, is brown paper bag. That would have been perfect for this card. I don't know what I did with them. I've been like setting everything aside, but I've got a mess to clean up as always. But I will link to the brown paper bag envelopes as well as just the regular slimline white open end envelopes. That would work really well for this too. I was happy with the black, but again, I think, the brown paper bag ones would have been just perfect because they would have looked very much like the front of the card, but it still worked. So I stamped the stamp again onto the envelope, and I'm doing the envelope sideways, like landscape version, because when you address envelopes like this, it's like a standard. People have been asking me about postage and that. It's the same as regular cards. Postage rates only increase if your card is too thick or if it's too heavy. But this size, you don't have to pay extra for because it's the same as like a standard business envelope. But when I stamp them, I want to stamp them the landscape version because of the way you add the address and the postage and that, it just looks better. So I stamped the envelope, and then I'm going to do a whole bunch of splatter. And I'm going to add first the Rusty Hinge splatter. So I just smushed it onto one of my little craft sheets. And then I used my SPLATBOX to try and prevent it from getting everywhere. And the splatter I was planning on doing anyway on the card front, but I ended up having to on the envelope because I literally spilled water on the envelope. You can't really see it thankfully in the video, but it happened. I did it. So the splatter kind of helps, make things look a little more intentional, etc. So I just added the splatter with the Rusty Hinge Oxide ink, and then I took a bit of Ranger's Distress Picket Fence white paint. And every time, same thing. I don't reach for this as often. I use other things for splatter. And then every time I do, I'm reminded I really like the Distress paints because they are much more liquid than typical craft paint. So added that splatter. And then for my sentiment, I'm using the Greetings Mix 2 stamp set. And I did cut a stamp apart. I know it absolutely horrifies some people, but if it means you're going to use it more often, plus I can still use it the way it was intended. I just butt them up together on my Misty or an acrylic block or whatever. But I find more often than not, if trimming a stamp or trimming apart a stamp or whatever means I'm going to use it more often, it's a win-win. And in this case, I wanted just the thinking of you part of this sentiment, the smaller part, I want separate anyway, because even if I was going to use both parts, I would take the smaller part and like heat emboss it or stamp it on a different color just to give it that little extra something. So for cutting apart stamps, I really like my little Ranger SNIPS. Those are the best scissors for cutting apart stamps, regardless of whether you're doing stamp surgery or you have to trim. I guess we don't trim out stamps anymore. That used to be a thing. That used to be a thing like 15 years ago. Anyway, I'm like all over the place. So I stamped the sentiment originally on the front panel. And then on the inside, I stamped the hug sentiment from the same set. And I was using VersaFine Clair Nocturne ink. And then I started thinking, and I decided to change it up a little bit. So I re-stamped that thinking of you sentiment just onto a scrap of white cardstock. And I trimmed it down with my paper trimmer. And then I pulled out my favorite black and white stripes pattern paper. People keep commenting, why not use like a diagonal stamp for this? Like a striped background stamp. I have lots of those stamps. They're amazing too. I just prefer pattern paper because it's quick and easy and I don't have to worry about me smearing black ink everywhere because that's what I do. I had rusty hinge ink. My hands are stained orange. Black ink smears everywhere, you know. But it is a great option too. And Simon actually has one of my favorite black or diagonal stripe stamps. I've used it a ton of times. I did a video years and years ago making my own paper with it. So, anywho, I adhered the card front panel to a piece of black cardstock and then adhered that to my card base. And then as a final little bit of embellishment, since this card for me is pretty simple and basic, I didn't use any foam tape and I didn't use my like shimmer splatter. So I'm adding a bit of bling. A bit, aka sticking bling everywhere. I used Studio Caudia's Ripe Persimmon pearls and some onyx crystals and some snow crystals just to tie it all together. So adhered those into place with dabs of the craft tacky glue, and that finished off this card and envelope. So as always, I will have a link below the video to my blog post. I'll link to the color throwdown challenge in my blog post, and I'll have links to all the supplies used, so you can check that out in the description box below if you are interested. Thank you all so much for watching and subscribing and thumbs upping and commenting. I really appreciate it. And I'll see you all very soon in the next video. Bye!